Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. We are 10 minutes before getting started with the 220 1001 A Plus study group. If you're watching this on the replay, you can either join us here for the pre-show or we will be starting in 10 minutes, so you can fast forward, move that little bar along the bottom, and you'll see in about 10 minutes we'll be getting started. We've got all A Plus 220 1001 questions for you today. Some of them are applicable to the 900 series, but all of them will apply to the 220 1001. So we'll go through that. There's a chat room on the website. When we are live, you can always find it at professormesser.com/live. Let's check. We're recording. We're recording in the other room. This is my streaming box. That's a video from that, so I know that's recording because it says it is. I've got questions are up. Let's see if we can connect to our workstation here. My iPad is not charged, so that will be interesting. See how well that works for us. The streaming here is working. Let's check analytics on that. Make sure that you are seeing me as well. You are. Hi, everybody. Chat room's available at professormesser.com/live. At the bottom, it's a live event chat. See, Rodrigo is here from San Jose, California. Welcome. Haven't been out to San Jose in a while. I need to get out there to Milpitas, to Tasman Drive. Haven't been out there in a while. Need to find a good reason to do that. I think I know a good reason. We were trying to figure out a way to do that, to kind of see, go to San Francisco, drive through, stay on the coast, that type of thing. We got to work on that. But I got to finish videos first. Reno is here. Nevada, welcome. We've got people joining in the chat. Welcome. People joining on the live stream. Welcome. We'll have the emails. We'll go out in about 5 minutes, and then more people will show up. We've got presentations. The cameras I've already checked. We're good there. You can't see it, but up above the screen here, I have a bunch of things going on there. Let's see if we can get these cameras all up and running. See if I can get my iPad up and running. I don't know if I can or not. This is going to be a challenge. Here we go. I took this iPad apart and replaced the screen, and it's never been the same since. So this may be one of those times where it has to be retired, and we have to work through there. West is here. See, we've got some East Coast checking in. Welcome. Haven't been there in a while. Need to get back up there. I went to a training. There was obviously a lot of technology up there. There still is. There's a lot of technology in that area. I was up there for training once. That was interesting. I'm always the training. Training is fine during the day. It's the nighttime where everything seems to go sideways. So that's what happened. DC's checking in. California is here. Knoxville, Tennessee. There is all A plus that we're doing today. There are questions that I wrote. I think I wrote these questions sometime last month, so I had to look over them today to remember what were those questions. I forgot completely. I've written every single question for every single study group this month already. I wrote them last month in an effort to, pretend to be efficient. But I got them all done ahead of time because I have all kinds of crazy things happening this month. So I got that all done, and then I promptly forgot all of them. So this will be like new for all of us. So see, that's how it works. Chicago's checking in. Kentucky. How things going there in Kentucky? There's a lot of storms, a lot of bad weather up there. Hope you're doing okay. North Carolina as well. Welcome, North Carolina. There's the folks in Florida. See, here in Florida, which is where the world headquarters is here of Messer Studios, lots of bad storms coming through. I lost power last night. I lost power the night before last. They just come through, lightning hits, takes out something. There were hundreds without power in my little area of the world yesterday. I guess really more than hundreds, probably thousand, given the number of people that were affected. Another Chicago, welcome. Or you're saying Chicago is having bad storms. Yes, this is one of the problems with this time of year, isn't it? It's used to travel a lot on the plains in this time of year. Well, all throughout the year, but this time of year, it's such a challenge for air travel. It's sometimes a challenge during the winter, but you can kind of see the snow coming, so you can get around it a lot of the time. But these bad storms are just so disruptive. You go to the airport and you wait. All right, there's our 5-minute notice. That means folks will have received their emails. You'll see the tweet that's gone out. There's Facebook postings. Now we really get some folks joining us. Welcome, Garland, Texas. There's much more to do today. We're doing this first hour of Q&A, and then I open up the phone lines for whatever reason, for whatever it is. It's open phone lines. You can ask anything. So the second hour is just whatever. You never know which direction it's going to go. Usually you're asking questions about the technologies, the industry, career, and I can at least give you my perspective regarding some of that as someone who has been a systems engineer, network engineer, workstation technician, field service, someone who's been in the industry anyway. There's Miami. Welcome, Miami. We were just talking about Miami yesterday. My wife was born in Miami, and I lived there for about 10 years. And we have friends that are visiting down there now, and we're getting a little homesick. A little bit homesick for Miami. Need to get down there. They went to have some Cuban food yesterday, and we were very jealous. You can't see or hear anything. That's horrible. All you have to do is go to the live stream, and I'll put that into the chat so you can see and hear everything. There you go. Nepal. See, there we go. Some folks joining from Nepal. That's a little bit of a stretch. We should check the times. You may be up in the middle of the night. There's the colony. More Texas. Lots of Texas checking in. Dallas is here. Indiana, welcome. How are we doing on time? I should probably check the calendar. Check the time stamps. I have 11:57 there, so 3 minutes or so. 2.5, actually, to get there. See how that works out. There is, you should be able to also get to the questions and answers. There's one already up. You can pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA, and that will take you to the Q&A. You can stay on that page. The questions will change as we change them, so you'll have access to that. Let's make sure this is going to work. So far, we're in pretty good shape there. That's ready to go. There's Orlando. Welcome, Orlando. There's, I will be in Orlando shortly. I already plan a trip down there. A little bit of business, a little bit of fun. It's always something to do in Orlando. Let's see if we can get through the first few questions. I should be able to remember what most of them are. Really, it's the answers. That's the difficult. That's the important part to remember. That's the part I have to get through. Let's see. I have not slated this yet. I don't think I need to for the live stream. Get this here. Okay. I think we're in pretty good shape, folks. We're going to start in about a minute and get things going. Yeah, I'm probably a little bit of Disney time when we're in Orlando. There's some other things going on in Orlando I got to take care of. There's always something going on somewhere I have to take care of. It's never me in one place ever, it seems, these days. Constant motion. I guess that's good, right? Get something going on with all of that. Let's, what else? All right. Get this going. I've got all Q&A in this first hour, so stick around for that. I've got all open phone lines in the second hour, which is really, truly open phone lines. You can ask anything and like, will I be at Black Hat this year? No plans this year for Black Hat. No plans. Is it still in Vegas? That's really my biggest problem with conventions, is that they are in Vegas. I just can't do it. I can't make it happen. I really should try. Well, the 221,001 videos all be posted by the end of June. They're all up. All the 221,001 videos are done. They've been done for months. So yes, They will be posted by the end of June because they've been posted a long time ago. So you're fine there. No problem with that. Oh, 1002. I don't know if it'll be the end of June. It'll be very close because there's only like 13 more videos to post, and they're all shot. So there's a quick answer. And why don't we get started with the live stream? Here we go, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2019 Professor Messer 220-1001 A+ study group from your friends here at Messer Studios. We're coming to you live on this June study group. We have the 220-1001 study group right now. We do a 220-1002 study group 2 days from now. So come back. This is Tuesday. Come back on Thursday, and we'll do another one of these. The first hour of what we're going to be doing is all going to be Q&A. So you really can't miss anything there. There's plenty of 220-1001 Q&A exclusive to the 220-1001 exam. We will be doing after that, once the first hour is done, we go to the second hour and we'll do open phone lines where you can call in and just ask any question you would like, whatever it is. I don't know if I have any answer you would like, but you can ask any question that you would like. We're going to go through all of this. We're able to do these live streams thanks to your help. You're watching the videos. Of course, every single minute of every single one of my videos is available online for you to watch. Every bit of everything I put out on every course is there, and that's the plan going always. We always make that available. You can find all of that on my YouTube site. Of course, on my website at professormesser.com, there's an index with transcripts. But of course, if you like the YouTube, you can find that YouTube channel and subscribe to it at professormesser.com/YouTube. Thank you for your subscriptions, by the way. You always hear YouTube people saying, please subscribe, please subscribe. That's because that is the only way we are able to show the folks at Google and YouTube how important our channel might be to others. And it does make a big difference. So thank you for that. Also, we have the daily pop quiz question available on the Twitter. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter. Sometime in this first hour, I will give you a super secret code word that you can use to send me an email. I'll give you all the directions of how you do this, and I will send you back an email with a digital signature that says you must have watched this, and you can have 1 hour of continuing education unit credit. CompTIA doesn't require that. They take it on faith that you've watched it. If you say that you've watched it, they'll take your CEU credit. But I like to give you a little bit of extra evidence just in case they happen to audit your CEU. Sometimes that's useful. So listen up in this first hour. If you're someone who is renewing your certification and you are using CEUs to renew your certification, not everyone is using CEUs for that. But if you are, I can give you one of those, of course. Today, we're going to talk all about the 220-1001. Of course, right now, you could take the 220-901-902 series, or you could take the 220-1001-1002 series of exams. Both exams are currently available. However, those 901-902 exams were released December 15th. Notice they retire on July 31st, 2019. So if you're somebody who's working on your A+ right now, you've not taken any exams right now, here we are in June, and you're trying to figure out which set of these exams should I be taking, do not take the 900 series. You have a month and a half or so to finish those. The average on one of these exams is about 3 months. So you really don't have enough time to properly study for the 900 series exams if you're going into this cold. But for those of you that have been studying for a long time, this is a perfectly valid set of exams to take. You will be A+ certified if you pass both the 901 and 902, as long as you pass both of them before July the 31st of this year, in a month and a half or so. If you're starting right now, you're in the middle of what you're doing, or you're looking at these dates and thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to pass both of these exams by July 31st, then you should be studying for the 1000 series exams. This is the 1001 and 1002. Hey, how about that? Today we're doing 1001 questions. That's why. So we can go through all of those. This exam relatively new. Came out in January. So this is only a few months old. This is an exam that is set of exams that we think is going to be around for about 3 years. So you've got plenty of time to study for the 1000 series. If you're doing anything right now, if I was studying for this exam right now, I'd be studying the 1000 series. That's the one I would choose as well. Both exams have exactly the same requirements, have exactly the same number of questions on the exam, the exact same number of minutes on the exam. It's a 900. The 900 series and the 1000 series have 90 minutes for the exams. You could get a maximum of 90 questions on each exam. Usually it's a little less than that, but they could ask you up to 90 questions. You have to get a 675 on the 1001 and a 700 on the 1002. This is in a scale between 100 and 900. What an odd scale, but that's the way they do it. I would not recommend, this has already been asked in the chat, so here's the answer to this one. This is a frequently asked question. If you have 900 series materials and you're taking the 1000 series exam, you're going to be at a disadvantage. You should have materials, study guides, books, videos that match the version of the exam that you're going to take. If you're going to take the 900 series exams, you should be using 900 series study materials. If you are taking the 1000 series exams, you should have 1000 series study materials. Do not use 900 series for the 1000 test. Do not use 1000 materials for the 900 test. There are differences in those two. And they're about just over 20% of the topics on the 1000 series are new from the 900 series. So think about that. You study all the 900 books, you walk into the exam, could be 20% of the exam is all material you didn't study. 20% is a big number when you're trying to pass an exam. So you're at a huge disadvantage if you do that. Make sure all of your study materials match the version of the exam that you plan on taking. We're going to talk about the 220-1001 today. So our questions will be on mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization, cloud computing, hardware, and network troubleshooting. On Thursday, we'll go through the 220-1002, which will be operating system security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So there's plenty to go through for these. My 220-1001 course is available right now. That's completed. We are done. If you're studying for your 1001, you can watch every minute of every video. There's also a downloadable version of this available for sale. If you wanted all the HD videos, you wanted all the MP3 files, you wanted my course notes, it all's bundled together, one single price. You can find out all about that. Where's that website? There it is, professormesser.com/download 1001. There is, this is a video replay that you can watch on my website. So if you miss the live version of this, you can always watch the video on professormesser.com. If you're a podcasting kind of person, like I am, and you just like to have your podcasts automatically show up on your mobile device, they're always there, they're always downloaded automatically, you can subscribe to the study groups with the podcast at professormesser.com/podcast. Use your favorite podcasting program, and you can, of course, listen on that page as well. That's available for you at professormesser.com/podcast. Let's get through these announcements, shall we? Oh, also, if you go to YouTube, about a day afterwards, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through all of this live stream and puts timestamps on every single question, every single answer, every call that comes in. She puts everything there. So go through this and you can find about a day later on YouTube. Make sure you expand out that video description. It's huge and has everything there. And a lot of people are trying to find specific things. You can find them right there on that video description. Let's do some Q&A, shall we? We've got plenty to go to today. One way that you can get to the Q&A is to go to professormesser.com/QA. Just open a new browser window and you'll be able to see that. You've got a question that will be there available in front of you. We're using a service called Socrative to do this. So you can also download the Socrative app from your favorite app store. And you want the Socrative Student app. It will probably ask you for a room name, and that room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. Here's our first question of the day. It's a rewind question. It's the question from last month. And you can see, gosh, I've got to look at this. It's not even formatted properly on my screen. How are you even supposed to read this to have this view here? Here's the question, though. A system administrator needs to connect a storage server to a 10G-based network on a switch 20 meters away. Which of the following would be the minimum category of cable needed to complete this task? You should be able to see that question as it's coming up. And if you've gone to professormesser.com/QA, you should see that question. You'll be able to answer it. And yes, after you answer it, it says you've completed. Wait for the next activity to begin. So just wait there. You'll see the next question come up as soon as we prompt for that next question. And a number of you are answering this. I get to see real time on my side, as you can see, the questions coming in. For example, 42% of you have said category 6, 27% have said category 5E, 16% said category 5, 10% said category 3, and 6% said category 6A. So we get to go through each question. We can answer them online, live. We get to see the answers as they are coming in. But what is the question for this one? It's a 10G base T network. We're connecting from a storage server to a switch. It's 20 meters away. Which one would really be the appropriate one to use? Well, we have to know that 10G base T, we have to first decipher that. That is the standard for 10 gig Ethernet over copper. 10 gig Ethernet over copper works at a minimum at 20 meters away, the minimum category that we would need if we have a look. Here's 10G base T. From 37 to 55 meters is the max. Our 20 meter distance is well under that, which means the minimum cable category we would need is category 6. If we were going over 50 meters, 55 meters or so, we were going up to 100 meters with 10 gig, then you would need category 6A, because that particular cable type will support 10 gig speeds, or it supports 10G base T standard, which is sending 10 gig speeds over and up to 100 meters, not over 100 meters. Notice that a lot of you said category 5 or category 5E. Category 5E is really the minimum standard you would find on today's networks. That is supporting 100 base TX and 1000 base T, so 100 megabit and 1 gig type speeds up to 100 meters. But it does not technically support any 10 gig. So that's why in this particular question, if we look at those answers, we had a number of people, 33% of you chose category 5E and 14% chose category 5. Those would not be the minimum category of cable. The minimum we would want would be a category 6. That is the minimum required for 10 gig and for 10G base T. That one is the right answer. If you answered D, category 6, the 41% of you got that one absolutely right. This is a replay question from last month. It's so that we can get in, try out these questions. Maybe a number of you recognize this question from last month. Going forward now, we've got all new questions for you, though. So let's go through some of the next questions that we have. All new questions from the 220-1001. By the way, those of you that are going to take this exam, the first set of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice questions like the one we just had. Many of you don't even realize this. I've gotten emails from folks that said, I walked into the exam, the first set of questions were not multiple choice, and I was thrown. Well, don't be thrown by this. This is perfectly normal. CompTIA will give you a set of questions at the beginning of the exam that are what they call performance-based questions. They are questions that are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to complete an activity. They might put you at a Windows desktop and ask you to complete an activity. They might have a drag and drop that you have to drag and drop things into. They might ask you to put things in a particular order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You're never sure exactly what they might be asking, but it won't be multiple choice. And there will be a handful of those at the beginning of the exam. I'm a bad test taker. So when I sit down for the exam, there's a lot of anxiety. I can't even read the screen. I don't know what's going on. There's a buzzing in my ears. It's a mess. So I usually skip over those and I come back to them later. The CompTIA exams are one of the few exams you can take in our industry that allows you to do that. So if you're comfortable taking those questions first off, by all means, please do it. If you're like me and you hate taking tests, you might want to jump over those. Go through the multiple choice questions, which might jog your memory enough when you come back to the performance-based questions to answer those a little bit better. All that being said, I have a performance-based question for you. The first question of every study group is a performance-based question. So let's do our performance-based question of the day. This one is really a fill-in-the-blank. I have this fill-in-the-blank. It's more of a visual daily double, if you will. Here's your first question of the day, and it's a performance-based question that asks, name these interfaces. And I'm not giving you any clues. There's no matching. There's no references. There's no names that you can associate with these. This is truly a fill in the blank. So this is a bit of a hard one. Some of you have emailed me after the study group and said, I really want a hard question as the performance-based question. So here we go with a hard performance-based question. It's a fill in the blank online. So you can just type in what you think it is. A is this, B is this, C is this, D is this, or just put them in the order. Just remember what you put in there, because when you submit them in Socrative, they disappear on the screen. You don't see them. I don't know either, but that's the way it works. So make sure you make a note of that as you're going through. So now some questions are going through. Oh, some of you are not happy. Some of you are sending me some mean no, you're not sending me mean notes, but now you have to know what these things are because there's no matching. This is a perfectly legitimate question on the exam, by the way. This is something you could run into. So I'm going through, a number of you are sending in. Some of you are doing very good with this. Some of you are doing extremely good with this. So keep that going with all of these. This is whenever you start getting into some of these questions, they can be a bit of a challenge, especially when you're trying to break down what these different things are. So maybe you can break that down and figure out those pieces. There we go. We're getting some answers in now as we go through this. On the performance-based questions you get on the exam, there could be a fill in the blank like this. Many times you get a command prompt. There are a few command prompt commands you need to know on the 1001. There are many more in the 1002. So if we do anything on the 1002, performance-based question-wise, you really need to be prepared on the 1002. But there are some that you will run into on the 1001. So don't think you're not going to get any. I've seen people putting messages on different online forums and saying, don't worry about command line on 1001. Not true. There's absolutely command line on the 1001 that you need to be aware of. So make sure you're familiar with those. Some of these interfaces, though, very familiar. Some of these interfaces, not so familiar. A little bit different than what you may have expected. So make sure you're familiar as you go through this with what all of those might be. And this was probably complicated by the fact that these are not pictures of the interfaces. They are a graphical representation of the interfaces, just to make it a little more frustrating for you, for that person that put that frustrating message in as the response. There is plenty that you need to know with these interfaces. And it makes sense. If you look at an interface on the back of a computer, you need to know what that interface is instantly. You don't have time to take a picture of it and Google it or post to a forum to figure out, is this video? Is it network? What is it? I don't know. You have to know those things cold. It's kind of fun to go back to the computer and have a look. What is that interface? What is that interface? What is that interface? That's a good Google image search for you, is to search for the back of computers and see if you can recognize what all the interfaces are. A good test for yourself. Let's see how we did with this one. Since this is fill in the blank, I can't give a summary of what everybody wrote, but let's go through each one of these. So the very first one, number A, it's not a number. Number A, almost everybody got universally on this one as I'm watching them go through. That, as we are probably all familiar, is an HDMI interface video, very common, one of the most common video interfaces you will find these days. B was not as common, but I feel a number of you are gamers or you have some type of video display that uses DisplayPort, because that is a DisplayPort interface. Well done with that. The third one, not as common. In fact, I'm not sure I would have gotten this one because it is a relatively uncommon type of interface, but a pretty important one to know, especially if you're on a laptop or you're using some type of external storage, because that is an external SATA connection, an eSATA, technically speaking. Yes, that's the eSATA connection, and it's that hat, that squished top hat view that really designates that as the eSATA. If you ever see that again, kind of an odd look for an interface. And it doesn't look like SATA either. It looks a lot different than SATA. So it's kind of hard to put those pieces together. D is a relatively common, but I'm noticing a lot of people answering for D, putting in just you're staying safe. You're just putting a generic USB because it is USB. Anybody care to take a guess what kind of USB it happens to be? It is a USB type B. So that's one that you may get a question about what that is versus another type. In fact, that's a USB. Is that a 3.0? I think that's a 3.0 type B. It's not a 2.1 type B. Actually, there are some 2.1s that do look a little bit like that. Mostly a 3.0. If you ever look at the Type B connectors, though, they are that big block connector. The 2.0 connector and the 2.1 connector are the big block, and then you add the additional pins for the 3.0. There is the last one here, and I think a lot of you got this one. This one is very common as well. There are some of you not happy that these aren't pictures. Some of you are wishing they were actual pictures of it. Unfortunately, on your exam, you could absolutely get a question like this that is not a physical picture. So hopefully this will help you. Most of you got this one as well, SATA. Look at the differences, though, between a SATA and an eSATA. And these are pretty much to scale. I tried to make them to scale when I put them on here. So you can see a pretty significant difference with the SATA interface that would be on a motherboard and on the internal storage for your system, and the eSATA, which would be an external storage. Very different type of connector. Yeah, I don't know why they do that either. But there it is. Those are the 5 different types: HDMI, DisplayPort, eSATA, USB Type B, and SATA. If you got those, then you did pretty well with those. Yeah, this is one that you should be pretty good. If you got all those right, then you did pretty well with these interfaces. If you got one wrong, that's okay. Because getting one wrong means you've been able to understand where the differences are between that interface and another one. And if you see that on your exam, you will be able to answer that one well. So keep an eye on those performance-based questions. Don't be thrown by the performance-based questions. You're going to do fine on the exam. Worst case, you can skip it and come back to it later. That's an advantage of taking those CompTIA exams, is you can do that. Let's do some multiple choice questions now. Let's shift gears. I have a multiple choice question for you that says, what type of laptop display backlight requires an inverter? What type of laptop display backlight requires an inverter? And I have some options for you, an A, B, C, D, or E. Remember, please don't answer these in the chat room or put any hints in the chat room. We instead want to be able to answer them as if we were sitting on the exam, because these possible options are LED, incandescent, LCD, plasma, or CCFL. What type of laptop display backlight requires an inverter? Is it LED, incandescent, LCD, plasma, or CCFL? Those are your 5 options. In the chat room saying, aren't the interfaces usually marked on a computer? No, rarely. Rarely. Sometimes you will see markings on an interface that will tell you, but not always. And that's one of the challenges you have with a lot of these. Hopefully, there will be one of those available. See, in the chat room, folks are saying that you could absolutely get a performance-based question on the 1001 exam, as I have mentioned. So make sure you're familiar with those command prompts that you would get. What type of laptop display backlight requires an inverter? Perhaps you happen to be familiar with these. If you think you know the answer, please go to professormesser.com/QA and answer there. Please don't answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We're going to have these messages go through and figure out all of these pieces as we go through these sections. This is one you can absolutely run into issues with, troubleshooting. This one question will save you some time if you're familiar with laptop display backlights and inverters. Let's see how many people are familiar with this. Let's take a guess. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button, and we're a little mixed. We didn't get a majority on this one, but 42% said LCD, 28% said CCFL, 16% said LED, 10% said plasma, and 3% said incandescent. So a few of us still stuck in that incandescent world. Thankfully, we do not have incandescent lights as a backlight on a display. You imagine that? Have a monster display with these big incandescent lights on the back. That probably is a reason we aren't using them. So definitely not B. It's not incandescent. We know that for a fact. Now, the question is an important one, because the question asks, what type of laptop display backlight requires an inverter? So the backlight is what we're looking for. What type of backlight requires an inverter? LED is a type of backlight, but LED, one of the nice things about LED is it doesn't need a converter or an inverter. Doesn't have to be inverted at all. It uses the DC power that's already available inside of your laptop. So LED natively using DC does not require an inverter. LCD is not a backlight. LCD is a type of display that you can use LED to shine light through. So LCD is actually a type of display. It is not a backlight, even though 43% of us chose that one. It is not the correct answer. We were looking for a backlight. Plasma, again, a type of display. Plasma doesn't have a backlight. Plasma makes its own light, so that would not be the right answer either. That leaves us with CCFL. 29% of you, about 30%, chose CCFL. CCFL is a backlight type. CCFL does require an inverter, which makes answer E the correct answer that we were looking for this question. This is one where we have to think about the olden days of backlights. Usually these days we're using a lot of LED as our backlight. So that means we don't have to go through this inverter, but you're still going to find a lot of devices that still have the cold cathode fluorescent lamps on them, CCFLs. And those CCFLs require that you have some way to invert the DC power and invert it to an AC power. So that's the one that's the important part of this, is that we have to use fluorescent lamps. Aren't going to be able to use that DC. They have to use AC. We have to use an inverter for fluorescent lamps. And you'll see them referred to as CCFLs. I don't have it listed as a CCFL in this specific slide, but I do in the course. CCFL is the cold cathode fluorescent lamps, and those are the only ones that require an inverter. Now, if that inverter goes out, the lamp won't shine any light. Doesn't work anymore. So you may be able to shine a flashlight on the LCD screen in front of you and see that there's text. You can make out the text on the LCD display. You're just not able to see it very well because there's no light from behind it shining through. So if you happen to see things happening on the screen and it's just very, 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 very dim, then your problem is the backlight. And if you know that the backlight happens to be the cold cathode fluorescent lamp, then you can say, well, it's either a problem with the lamp or it's a problem with the inverter. Very often, it's the inverter that's the problem. So if you answered E, CCFL, that is the right answer. The 30% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's shift gears and is the next one a networking question? It sort of is. It's from the perspective of a network administrator. Let's do another question here that deals with the network administrator that has a specific requirement, and it says that a network administrator would like to consolidate log files from all firewalls, switches, and routers. Which of the following protocols would be the best choice for this requirement? This is a pretty common task for the network administrator. You have some options available. Network administrator would like to consolidate log files from all firewalls, switches, and routers. Which of the following protocols would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be SSH, SNMP, syslog, SMB, or LDAP? 5 options there. All 5 of these are real protocols. All 5 of them real things you'd find on your network. Only one of them would be the best choice for this requirement. Hopefully you've been able to see some of these technologies in use and be able to make that happen. Some of these are pretty useful, but do different things. So you want to find the best choice for the things that you're able to do here. If you think you do know the answer, please don't put any of those answers in the chat room. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/QA, put your answers in right there. You'll be able to plug them in and be able to get those answers straight away. Plug them in, lock them in. Is that your final answer? Put it in there. You'll be able to see after you lock it in, it says, okay, you've submitted it. You have to sit there and wait now as we get to the next part of the question. This is a pretty common requirement for the networking team. Can you imagine the log files you have to get in a single network? You have log files on switches, routers, firewalls, operating systems, other infrastructure equipment. Maybe you've got air conditioning systems. The HVAC systems may have log files on them. Phone systems have log files on them. Anything that is running that has a log file, it would be nice if you were able to get all those log files back to a central point. So make sure you are familiar with how you would do that. In fact, this is a challenge a lot of organizations deal with. Can you imagine how many log files you have on a server? Now 10 servers, now 100 servers. You can see the challenge with trying to get all that information brought back to one single place. But how do you do it? How do you make it happen? Let's see how we made it happen. How do we do with this one? And you can see that, again, we're a little bit torn. We have that 39% said SNMP, 36% said syslog, 10% said SMB, 9% said SSH, and then 6% said LDAP. So hardly anybody said LDAP, and that for good reason. LDAP, very good for storing information, accessing information that's in a database of information, but LDAP is not used for log consolidation. That's not what we would use the LDAP protocol for. Same problem with SMB. The server message block is a type of protocol that Windows uses to transfer files between other Windows devices. Sometimes you can use SMB in other operating systems as well, but it's usually focused as a Windows protocol. SMB is not one that you would use to consolidate log files, though, because your firewalls aren't running Windows, your switches aren't running Windows, your routers aren't running Windows. They're probably not going to communicate via SMB. SSH is a protocol that you would use to connect to those firewall switches and routers at a terminal screen to be able to manage them. So SSH, a pretty good choice for this, which brings us down to the top two that we got, which was SNMP and syslog. And the one that really provides us with consolidation of log files is a protocol specifically written for this called syslog. If you go into the configuration of your switch, of your router, of your firewall, of your IPS, of any of these infrastructure devices, there will be an option to specify a syslog destination. And ideally, you would already have this running, of course. You would have tons of drive space. You would have a syslog receiver or a syslog daemon running on a machine. And you would simply say, go point to that IP address, send all your log files down to that particular server, and you would be able to receive them into the SIM. This is one, as I mentioned, that you will need tons of drive space, more than you expect. You will be using a lot of drive space because these logs are massive. Just tons of information. And that's exactly what you want, by the way. You want one central place. Well, it's going to cost you when you put them in there. Some organizations will even put them on like a worm drive, a write once, read many, especially if you're concerned that someone may be changing these logs afterwards, or you want to prove that these logs were not changed afterwards. That's one of the things that you can use to help along those lines. So syslog is the right answer. Only 32% of you chose syslog. 45% chose SNMP. Why would it not be SNMP? It seems like a perfectly reasonable network administrator protocol to use, the simple network management protocol. But SNMP is used for real-time queries to a device to generally query the health or the performance of a device. So if you want to know how many bytes have transferred through a particular interface, you want to know how much the memory utilization is in a device, you want to know how much drive space is still left on a device, that's what SNMP is used for. And it's usually an interactive conversation. How much drive space do you have? Here's how much I have left. How many bytes have gone through this particular interface? Here's how many bytes have gone through the interface. This back and forth conversation with SNMP. SNMP is not used to transfer log files. It's not used to consolidate log files. You generally don't look at log files using SNMP. You're really going to have to understand the differences between SNMP and syslog. And you'll see on in the videos that I do break out what those differences are. So you can see those differences as you're going through these different protocols. And it's important to understand not just the name of the protocol. A lot of people focus on the name. SNMP stands for Simple Network Management Protocol, which might help you remember what it does. It's most important that you know what SNMP does rather than what the name of it happens to be. I would think on the exam they would probably use the abbreviation anyway, but it's really important that you understand, how do you use SNMP? Where is it used? What is the purpose of that particular protocol? Those are the important things. So it's not a logging type situation. It's one where you're gathering metrics. It's analytics. It's real-time performance. It's understanding how a device is performing. Whereas log files are giving you a historical perspective of what those devices have seen. And in fact, the syslog files are going to be much, much larger than SNMP almost always in that scenario. So if you answered syslog. The answer C, that is the correct answer. The 32% of you got that one absolutely right. We're not quite hitting that 50% that I like to hit with these questions. Maybe the next few questions will be a little bit better. There's a ton of information on these exams. We've already gone through quite a wide variety of different topics that we've been talking about. I've gone through every single one of my videos. I've taken all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the charts from all of these videos, and I put them into course notes. So there's a 221,001 course notes. There's a 221,002 course notes. So if you're trying to learn about all that hardware, the interfaces, the networking part, we talked about the categories of cable. We've talked about all of these different technologies already. Those are all in my 221,001 course notes. Now, of course, you should take your own notes if you'd like to. I highly recommend that you do. Get a good book, watch some videos, do some Q&A. But sometimes you like everything consolidated, one single place, and kind of a quick reference guide before you walk into the exam. That's what I designed these course notes to be. This is one where you can purchase these course notes for $20. It's a PDF file. You can download it immediately, put it on your laptop, put it on your mobile device, carry it with you wherever you, what's happened? Wherever you go. There we go. Take it with you wherever you go, so that you'll have access to these course notes. They're so good. They just choke me up. These course notes are so good. You'll love them. The course notes themselves are available in that digital format. There's a physical format of them as well. This physical format has exactly the same information in it. There's no difference in the physical format versus the digital format. Full color, high quality, perfect bound, like a paperback book. It's another one. If you purchase the physical version, you get the digital version for free. So if you buy this, I'll ship it to you. But in the meantime, you could download the digital version. Yeah, barely made it out of that, didn't I? That was a close one. Who knew that was going to happen? It's a live stream. That's how it works. If you want more information on this, you can find it at professormesser.com/1000notes. A number of you have talked about contributing to the site. I give away all these videos for free. You want to find some way to give back. I don't take donations. I'd rather you get something for your money. So if this is one of those ways that you can help contribute to the site, because every dollar goes back to keeping this craziness going, and you get something in return. I think it's something valuable that will help you with your exam, because I want you to pass these exams and get a job or get a better job. That's our goal here. So hopefully we'll be able to make that happen as well. So find out more, professormesser.com/1000notes. Let's do some more Q&A. If I can make it through this. You think maybe I can? It's a question at this point. I have another visual question for us. For those of you wanting a picture of a connector, you are not happy with my performance-based question. I saw you in the chat room, and you're not entirely wrong. It's much easier to see a picture and be able to make that happen. So I have a picture for you. Here is your question. Here it is. That asks, what type of network would use this connector? What type of network would use this connector? Now, fortunately, unlike the first question I gave you, which was fill in the blank, this is a multiple choice. So what type of connector would use that connector? What type of network would use that connector? And your options available are DSL, Ethernet, DOCSIS, WAP, PoE. Those sound funny, but they're real things. DSL, Ethernet, DOCSIS, WAP, and PoE. Now, by the way, those of you listening on the podcast, I'm sorry. This one's very visual. This is one where you have a picture of a connector. There it is. And you have to, there's a big connector on the screen. It's a little dirty, isn't it? There's some dirt on the bottom of that. Whoever crimped this, where did this come from? Those that are here. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer the question there. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. You don't want to give anybody any ideas. Maybe it is corrosion. It's sitting out a while. Who knows where that came from? These are all going to be quite. This is not my cable. This is all of these pictures come from stock images. So I have no idea why it looks the way it looks. We're all just appalled here in the chat room were appalled physically looking at it, at these connectors. That's not entirely true. Some of the connectors I have in my course are ones that I did because you just don't have cable pictures on some of these newer connectors. But this one, that's one that came from somewhere. Maybe it did come out of my closet. I got to tell you, if it came out of my closet, it would look much worse than this. There, that's helpful for those of you that are trying to figure it out. Mine would be appalling. So there, that should give you perspective. This is a beautiful, clean connector compared to the ones that I have. So that's probably the reason I used it. Let's see how we did with the answer, though. What type of network would use this connector? It's all up there. It's kind of hard to read because it's way up there above the picture. How do we do? Let's see. Well, we're torn again with what this one might be. What could it be? Well, 49 or 48%, close to 50% said DOCSIS. We have 33% that said DSL. We've got 10% that said Ethernet, 5% said WAP, and 3% said PoE. Now, if we went again with the largest number here, almost a majority, I think we can call it that. Well, there it is, 50% have chosen that. Now that you've had a chance to see what other people are putting in, you've now put the answer in. DOCSIS is what most people are saying. But clearly a third of you, DSL, and everything's single digits after that. So we need to think about what type of connection this would be. Very common to use this type of connector. For those of you familiar with this connector, this is one that you would see as an F connector, and it's commonly used on what we use it for mostly is broadband type connectivity, where you're bringing in different frequencies on the same cable, and it's usually provided by a cable provider because it's providing your video, it's providing, in many cases, voice, and it's providing data. All three of those across many, many different frequencies on the same media. If you're getting data this way, if you're getting a cable modem connection this way, then you are getting this over a DOCSIS network. This is Data Over Cable Service Interface Specification, DOCSIS. That's how we are able to have a standard protocol that all of these modems, the cable companies, they're all using the same equipment. All of this equipment has a single set of standards associated with it, and that standard is the DOCSIS standard. So if you are thinking, what type of, it's not Ethernet that's going over that connection from the cable company, what type of protocol, what type of standard is in use? It's the DOCSIS standard. So that's where that's coming from, is that DOCSIS connection. If you're coming in on that cable modem with that F connector, with that coax, then it's using DOCSIS to be able to communicate. That's the type of network that's there. Commonly, you see this used on anywhere from 4 megabit up to about 250 megabit, although I have gigabit speeds available in my area for cable modem, and we're starting to see higher numbers as well. So those technologies continue to improve and increase over the DOCSIS standard. So if you ever see that F connector, that coax connection coming in, it's not going to be DSL, although a third of us did say DSL. DSL uses the standard POTS phone lines, the plain old telephone service phone lines. So it's one that you commonly see, but those POTS lines are not going to be using coax. They're going to be using just a standard two-line connection coming in. So that's one whenever you're trying to find out what are we going to use for this DOCSIS cable modem connection, they're going to bring in coax and plug it in. So that's where that's coming from. There are standards for fiber as well. Fiber generally not using DOCSIS for that, though. So it's one where you're not going to run into those scenarios for those particular ones. If you see a cable like that one, you're going to be running cable modem, and it's going to be DOCSIS. So we did pretty well. 50% of you did very well with the DOCSIS. Now I'm getting some flickering on my side with some of the videos, so I'm going to do a quick change up on my side. You're not going to see this on your side, but I'm going to switch around a few things on my side. So we're going to see if we can get my flickering to stop. Another advantage of having all of these problems with all the storms coming in, there's constant changes going on, and in this studio, I lost, in fact, the lights that are in front of us stopped working. I wasn't able to connect to the device that allows me to control the lights. So I had to get up on a ladder this morning and actually unplug the lights from that power unit and plug it directly in. So hopefully we're not going to run into those scenarios and those problems as we go forward. Let's see how we can do with this next question. We're going to shift gears again into hardware. I don't think my flickering has stopped, but we'll struggle through. You folks are pretty good with this. I think we'll be all right. We can figure out the details later on. Here's our question, which asks, which of these components would commonly be powered from a computer power supply's plus 3.3 V output? Which of these components would commonly be powered from a computer power supply's positive 3.3 volt output? That's what the V is. So I've already given you a hint. V is for volt. I think you knew that when you came through here. Let's see what our possible options are. Would it be a PCIe adapter? Would it be a RAM module? Would it be a cooling fan? Would it be a hard drive? Or would it be a 9-pin serial port? So one of those 5 things for those. That could be a challenge. Yeah, hopefully the flickering, I've reset the adapter that I used to get you this video. So hopefully the flickering has stopped for us. We'll see how that goes. Some folks in the chat room saying it's out of focus. Well, that's a bigger problem for you, my friend. You may want to click the cog wheel at the bottom and increase the resolution of your particular screen. Maybe you can get a better download rate by choosing the 1080p, 720 or something other than what you may be watching it on. I'm sending 1080p. So if you're seeing this, you can certainly choose 1080p to watch this in the resolution that I'm sending out to YouTube. And then YouTube is sending you everything else. So you're not seeing my direct stream, but you're seeing the one that's coming from the YouTube. And it generally works pretty well. Which of these components would commonly be powered from a computer power supply 3.3 volt output? The options again were PCIe adapter, RAM module, cooling fan, hard drive, or 9-pin serial port. This is a new type of question for the 220-1001 exam. They did not go into details with what components worked with what devices, but I found that there on the exam objectives, they went into a little bit more detail on the 1001. And since they went into more detail, I felt I needed to go into a little bit more detail as well. And only a little bit. There's only a little difference between the 900 and 1000 series with this question. I just felt it important and necessary that you understand what you would find running with those different voltages. And I've seen some questions that might lead you down the road of needing to know those things. So hopefully this will be something that can help you with some of the things that you're going through. Let's see how you did with this one. Some of you may be builders of computers, and this may be a common thing that you run into. You may already know what the different components use from a voltage perspective. 3.3 volt, pretty common. Let's see how we do with this. We see that 48% chose cooling fan, and then it's almost a 3-way tie between PCIe adapter at 17%, RAM module at 15%, and hard drive at 14%. We have 9-pin serial port, only 5% chose 9-pin serial port. So you've got different options available there. But if we go with what is pretty close to that magic number of 50% is C, cooling fan. But is that really the right answer of what we were looking for? The cooling fan could certainly be 3.3 volt. Let's step through what we would find on a power supply and see if we know what these might be. Because there are different voltages that are going to be provided by a power supply. For instance, a plus 12 volt would be used, well, you can think that's a pretty high voltage, so it would be for devices that really need a lot of power. PCI Express adapters, hard drive motors, some cooling fans, most modern components will be using plus 12 volts. They will. And there is a need to have a lot of 12 volt. It makes it easy if everything's at the same voltage inside of the device. But many components on the motherboard that are there are using lower voltages like 5 volts. You will find that usually in the older motherboards. Most motherboards, and we're trying to get the voltage numbers down farther and farther, and you'll find 3.3 volt is one that's commonly used for RAM slots, logic circuits on the motherboard, M.2. There's plenty of places you can go to find those 3.3 volt type output. And in fact, this is the one that we were trying to determine for 3.3 volt. These are the things we needed to know: M2, RAM, motherboard logic circuits, those smaller components on the motherboard. And RAM slots was probably the one we were looking for here. RAM module would be the one running at plus 3.3 volts. There are other power supply voltages that you would find as well. For example, a negative 12 volt, which is not often seen any longer. Integrated LAN does use negative 12 volt. Some older serial ports, some of the traditional PCI, not PCI Express, but PCI uses negative 12 volt. You don't commonly see that on being used much on the modern motherboards, certainly. And a negative 5 volts is what you would have for ISA adapter cards. So you're not even going to be close to seeing that particular voltage. You may still have power supplies that can provide it. I don't even think the power supply I have here even has an option for negative 5. It doesn't. So your modern power supplies won't even provide that. And most of the components are, as people are mentioning in the chat room, use those lower voltages. Where there's always a drive to use less and less and less power if at all possible. It keeps the heat down. It keeps the power usage down. It's perfect for mobile devices. We try not to use that power. But the answer on this one, for a plus 3.3 volt, we're probably going to use a RAM module. It's not going to be PCI adapter. That was a plus 12. Cooling fan was a plus 12. Hard drive was a plus 12. 9-pin serial port would probably be used for that negative 12. So that is where you would find those voltages. There are only about 5 different options for voltages, and really only 3 of those are used on modern devices. It would help you on the exam for you to become familiar with what type of devices might use those different voltages. I think that may be useful to keep that in mind as well. So if you are, and of course, as people are mentioning, 10 years from now, if you're watching this video, this could be very different because we're always changing what devices use what type of voltages as we make these standards different. There could be certainly challenges in keeping up with that. So this is one of those it's a living document. In my case, it's a document that won't change at all. I'll have to update this one later on. So things will absolutely change as time goes on. But from this list, and you can look at the question itself, which specifically is labeled, which of these components would commonly be powered from a computer power supply's 3.3 volt output. So you have to look at this entire list and think which one of these would be the most common for 3.3 volts. There's really only one on this list that jumps out. So that's the type of scenario you will be faced with on the exam. You want to become very familiar with that scenario. If you're watching this video for continuing education credit and you'd like to receive an email from me with a digitally signed email in return that says you must have watched this, you have to follow these instructions. Make sure you follow these instructions. If you don't follow these instructions, you don't get the email back. The instructions are part of receiving the CEU. It means that you must have watched at least up to this point and that you are listening enough to know that this is the process you go through. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link there. In that Contact Us link, it helps me a lot in the subject line. If you put somewhere that you're looking for CEU, if you put this is the June 2019 221,001 A+ study group. In fact, if you put the super secret code word in there somewhere in the subject line or very early in the text of the email, and let's make the super secret code word RAM module, since that was the right answer on this particular question, which was B, RAM module. Put RAM module somewhere in there. And then if you make it obvious, it helps me a lot. Some of you try to hide it in a sentence that you're putting in there, which makes it more difficult for me to find. Please try to make it very prominent because I go through hundreds of these. It's easier if I can pick it out really quickly and I'm off to the races. And of course, you can put anything else you would like in that message as well. They all come directly to me. I can read through them. I don't necessarily have time to reply to every single one of those, but I do read them, just so you know. Make sure you're familiar with that. As I mentioned, this is for CEU. Some of you are not using CEUs to renew your certification. You might be using CertMaster CE. You might be taking a higher level certification. Whatever you're doing, that's great. You don't need the CEUs in this particular case, but this is another one that some of you would like to use, and I'm more than happy to provide that to you. Make sure you follow those directions, and you will do fine with receiving that CEU. I'm way behind, by the way. Some of you have sent me emails saying, are you okay? Is everything all right? Have you gone missing? No, I just haven't sent back the CEUs yet. I will be sending them back very quickly, I promise. Maybe I can get them done this afternoon. That would be nice. If we get all of those in today, that would be fantastic. We got time for another question, right? Let's do another one before we're out of time. This question, definitely a 221,001 question because it asks, what type of networking configures a VM IP address on the same network as the physical host? What type of networking configures a VM IP address on the same network as the physical host? Is it shared, private, hybrid, routed, or bridged? Those are your 5 options: shared, private, hybrid, routed, or bridged. This is more of a terminology question, isn't it? This one doesn't have a lot of twists and turns to it. I'm asking a very specific question, and in this case, there's a very specific answer between these 5 options. Hopefully that's one you're familiar with. A lot of people mentioned on the 221,001, there is some cloud-based technologies, questions, those types of topics are on the 221,001. It's not a huge section, though. A lot of people think it was a massive change and now it's tons of cloud-based. It's not. It's like 3 videos out of the 40 for the 45 or so for the 1001. Not a lot of videos, but it is important topics. These are important technologies that are being used every single place you would run into. If you're going into a job, you will be using some type of cloud infrastructure somehow, somewhere. You can't get away from it. So it's important to understand these terms. So when you're sitting in the meeting, everything's not flying over your head. You have at least some perspective as to what may be going on around you. And of course, this question is one about using VMs on a device. Hopefully, this is one that can help you as you're going through these different questions about VMs on devices. I'm going to take a sneak peek at how we're doing with this one. There are different ways to configure network interfaces on these VMs. And so we have to know what those differences are. Let's see what you chose with your answers. 42% of you said bridged, 21% of you said private, 17% said shared, 15% said hybrid, and 5% said routed. If you are configuring virtual machines on your computer, and I highly recommend that you do this, download VirtualBox. Go out to virtualbox.org. Download VirtualBox. It is free. You can run it on Windows. You can run it on Mac OS. You can run it on Linux. Almost all the VMs out there have a VirtualBox flavor of the VM. And a lot of these virtualization systems can even run VMs from drives built on other systems, either by importing or using them directly. But when you're configuring these virtual machines, which are simply a machine that's running on your desktop, when you do it this way, those virtual machines have virtual network interface cards. Now, how do they interact with the network that you're already using? So that's one that you'd have. Yeah, you can only use one of these. So some folks are saying, I tried loading VirtualBox, but I'm using Hyper-V. Yes, you can only use one at a time. So Hyper-V usually runs as a service. So you can't, if you're using Hyper-V, use Hyper-V. If you're using VMware's virtualization technologies, they're different depending on the operating system you're using, use those. But pick one and go with it. They're remarkable technologies to be able to use. There's also the networking piece we need to think about. If we want our VM to share the same address as our machine, to have exactly the same IP address as the one that is physically connected to our physical device on the physical network, then we would configure a shared network address. Has the same IP address, uses a private IP address internally. So if you look at the VM, that virtual machine actually has a completely different IP address than what your local workstation has because it's doing network address translation. So that's why it looks a little different if you look at it. Now, the question here was asking about a VM IP address that was on the same network as the physical host. Well, obviously, if the VM has a different IP address, then we're not on the same network. So in this particular case, shared network address would not be the correct answer. What you would probably want is a bridged network address where the virtual machine is effectively connecting through and plugging into the same network that your workstation is. So it's going to have a different IP address, but it will be on the same IP subnet. It usually gets a DHCP address from the same DHCP server you got. So if your IP address was 192.168.1.3, then your VM is probably 192.168.1.4. So it looks like it's a machine sitting right next to you, plugged into exactly the same network that you're plugged into, but it's really a virtual machine running inside of your device. And if you don't want to communicate outside, you want that virtual machine to be on its own little world, its own little island, then that would be a private network where it has its own IP addresses that don't communicate out to the rest of the world. And that might be useful to you as well. So what we're looking for is a bridged network connection. There are the different options I have. You can find those on my 1001 4.2 video client-side virtualization. The bridge network address is the one we were looking for. And the bridge network address you have here is E. If you answered E, bridge network, 39% of you got that one absolutely right. Those bridge networks can be extremely useful. When I'm setting up a VM, I'm commonly using a bridge network so that there's no NATing. I communicate directly to that device from my local network. I don't have to worry about a network address translation issue. I can go connect immediately and be on that network. It makes it so much easier. But there are times when putting it on its own network that is a shared network address can be useful as well. Depends on what you're doing. I find most of the time I'm just doing bridge because it's convenient. Sometimes it's more than convenience. You have other requirements that you have to work through, especially if you're working in a corporate environment. It might be a private network that's the most important for you. So make sure you know how that VM is connecting to the network, and you will do just fine with that. Every single one of these questions today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have these objectives, you're doing yourself a disservice. This should be the first thing you download. It should be the last thing you reference before walking into the exam. It lists out for you everything you need to know for the exam, which is a common, frequently asked questions on my website, which is, what do I need to know? What topics are the most important? Guess what? CompTIA listed all of them out for you, which, by the way, nobody else does. Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody does this. CompTIA is really giving you a leg up. They're giving you an enormous advantage by having these exam objectives available. Make sure you download them. I've got a link to CompTIA's website that you can find. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives will take you right there, just redirects you, or you go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you get the latest version of those for all of those pieces. So for those of you that are asking in the chat room, how do I know if I'm ready for the exam? There's your checklist right there. Go through that list, check off everything, and you'll know if you're ready for the exam. It's a great way to do it. I have these study groups once a month. So I have this 221,001 study group today. On the 11th this is July actually. On the 13th, in 2 days from now, I have the 1002 study group. And the next month, our 1001 and 1002 study groups are on July 9th and July 11th. So we kind of skipped that first week of July, by the way. For those of you in the U.S., Independence Day is on July the 4th. So that's why we're skipping that week. A lot of us will be celebrating our independence. So bad time to do a study group. Not going to do one on the 4th of July. That's just a bad idea. So we'll skip a week. We got plenty of time. So we'll go through that on the 9th and 11th. We'd love to have you come back in July and go through these as well. Well, that's all the Q&A we've got for today, at least the Q&A that I'm going to ask. Over the next hour, it's Q&A that you ask. I'm going to open up the phone lines. You can call in and ask any question about anything you would like, and we'll see if I have an answer about anything. It doesn't have to be about CompTIA. It certainly can be. It can be about anything relating to technology, relating to life, the universe, and anything. I'd be glad to have a conversation with you. Don't forget about the daily pop quiz available on the Twitter. You can find it at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. Of course, all of my videos for all of my courses and everything that I do is on the YouTube. ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube will get you there. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for clicking the bell so you know when I upload things. Incredibly important. Thank you so much for that. If you do nothing else today, that makes me very happy when you subscribe. A+ course notes are available at ProfessorMesser.com/1000notes. You can find both the 220, 1001 and 1002 there. If you're wondering, you're watching this on the replay and you're wondering, this is after July, when is the next live event going to be? You can find all of them on my website at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. Well, thanks for being here in this first hour. Stick around. We got plenty more to come in the second hour. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Let's see if I can get the phone lines up and running. Oh, there we go. The phone lines up and running. I've got some phone lines to pull in here, so bear with me just a moment as I get some of those things done. I've got more screens to pull up Yeah, I think our flickering screen has stopped its flickering, so I'm pretty happy about that. We did pretty well. Just to have you turned it off and back on again. It's really a simple process, which is exactly what I did for all of that. Let's start her up here. And I've got things that I need to click on my side to start this up, and then I will tell you exactly how you can call in and ask questions. You're also able to ask questions in the chat room as well. There have been a number of questions that have come in. So let's see how I can get, clickety click click. Yep, that's what I want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see what I need to call in as. I need to click some things on my screen, and if I do that,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I'll do that. We'll put that in, and then it says,
welcome.
See, welcome, which is what I say to you, which is welcome. I want you to be able to call in as well to these phone lines or ask questions in the chat room. I take them from both places. If you want to call in anywhere in the continental United States, it's a toll-free number. Doesn't cost you a thing. 855-785-RJ45. If you are calling in from anywhere else outside of the continental United States, it's still free if you use Skype. Skype will allow you to call without any Skype minutes for an 800 number. You put in a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in as well, and we can have a conversation with voice. It's using voice communication with a phone. I know, hard to believe. The kids aren't doing that these days. We don't run into that very often. Let's go through a couple of questions as these phones are coming in. Hello, callers, but we'll answer some of these questions quickly that are in the chat room. Yep, Cisco made big changes to their certifications. Of course, the Cisco certification's a little bit beyond the scope of a Network Plus might be. There were questions earlier about which one's better, Network Plus or the CCNA exams. Those are completely different certifications. That's like asking the difference between a fruit and a building. They're different things. They're used for different things. They're completely different scenario. You should certainly consider them that way. They are very different. Some of the topics are similar, but quite honestly, very different certifications designed to be used for completely different things and a very different set of complexities between those two exams as well. They are in no way comparable to each other. Are there any plans for doing practice tests for the 1000 series? There are. Well, it will be somewhat similar to the 900 series practice tests I did. It will be an actual practice test. So I plan on coming out with practice tests to be able to do that. Unlike the last one, which was just a ton of questions, what if I was able to take those questions, make them sound like CompTIA questions, make them feel like CompTIA questions, and had the same mix of topics that you would find in a traditional CompTIA exam? I think that's I think it's a little more valuable than the 900 series. And once I am done with the 1002 video editing, that's where we start, is to get those out and make them available. Does the CompTIA A Plus exam content modify its content for where the student is taking it? For example, in the UK, electrical fire extinguisher types at ABC, which is different than the one in the US. I don't know if it's different or not, but extinguisher fire types are not part of the exam objectives anyway, so that's not an issue. They are exactly the same topics regardless of where it is, and the topics in the exam objectives are relatively universal. There's not much differences. There's some things that are US specific, but they are very, very minor on the exam. Things dealing with the requirements for the knowing how to dispose of different things is different depending on where you happen to be in the world, for example. So that's one that can help you as well. Let's go to the phone lines. I've got some calls that are coming in, then we'll come back to the questions in the chat room. We'll start with the 703 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Laith. I'm calling from Falls Church, Virginia.
All right. Welcome, Virginia. Thanks for calling, Lee. What can we do for you?
Yes. So I wanted to get some insights on. I don't know if this is good. I guess good start. Well, first of all, I haven't received any of my certifications. I was planning to get the 901 and 902, but I feel like I'm a bit too late because I'm still on the 901. So I decided to move on to the 1001.
Good move.
The 1001 exams. So I was wondering, do you think that there might be some materials that are different from the 901 to the 902? Sorry, from the 901 to the 1001.
There are quite a number of differences. I've documented on previous study groups that I went through all of the exam objectives for 901, and then I went through all of the exam objectives for 1001, and I compared what the differences were. And there were a number of things that were dropped off of the 1001 exam, but more importantly, 20% of the exam topics on the 1001 are new from the 901, which means they're not even mentioned in the 901 exam objectives. They are completely new. So if you were to go through and read a 901 book, you would miss 20% of the exam objectives that you would get on a 1001 exam. So that's an important difference for those. I think 20% is a pretty big number. So yes, there are some significant differences. It would take you just a matter of minutes. If you really, really, really want to know what those differences are, you can go through both of those side by side and map out what those differences are. It's not an incredible difference on the exam for those two, but 20% is a pretty big number when you're sitting in front of that exam and trying to determine what you do, which is why I tell people, if you're shifting gears like you are, and you've decided, I don't have time for the 900 series, let's go for the 1000 series, I really recommend you get a 1000 series book. I really recommend you watch 1000 series videos and do 1000 series Q&A because there is a significant difference. 20% may not seem like a lot, but in my mind on a test, 20% is relatively significant. So make sure you have the right materials.
Yeah, because I feel like I've studied enough on the 901. I do have some of that material to go on and advance on the 1001, which is not going to be as hard and not as long as studying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You only have 20% more that you'd have to study. A lot of that's going to be extremely familiar to you. It's going to be an easy transition.
Correct. So that was the first question. Second question. Now, I hope I can ask you just as far as the business point of view, starting business in the IT field.
Sure.
So let's say that I want to start maybe an accessories shop or a repair shop. Now, I know a lot of people are going digital and all that stuff. What's the best thing, once I get some experience, of course, in the IT field, I'm not just going to start a business right away. So do you think that a person should, because what I want to do is build computers and be able to sell those computers, would that be a good idea? Would that kind of be a bad idea? Or how can that work for someone that has a business mind?
The key with anybody in any business, in any vertical, whether you are in IT, technology, transportation, healthcare, manufacturing, doesn't matter what the business is, the real thing you're trying to find is the gap that nobody else is providing. You have to find the thing that is perhaps in your geographical area or the thing that is online that nobody else has or nobody else is providing in a way that you think they should be. This is the thing that is this is the question that you're asking is the question for people trying to start a business. This is the number one problem that has to be solved, which is where is the gap? Where are things being missed? Where are things that I could do better than what other people are doing? And are people willing to pay for that? There is no easy answer for this. The best thing I can tell you is that every single case that I've ever seen where I looked at somebody doing a business and thought, well, they're just doing the same business other people are doing. But if you look closer, they're actually adding some value. They're doing something a little bit different. They're adding additional capabilities, whether it's they come to your house to fix it, whether they are in a particular area. One that I found recently, and I thought it was brilliant, here in Florida, we have a lot of storms. There's a lot of people that get their car washed. There's a car wash that we have locally, and they have people just are in there all the time bringing their cars in. Well, somebody set up a mobile device repair shop in the car wash. Because if you've ever been to a car wash, and they're the one where they're washing your car, you have to sit there for like 15, 20, 30 minutes as they do this. What if somebody's sitting right there? Everybody, by the way, has a problem with their phone, it seems. You look at your friend's phone, their screen is cracked, or there's a problem with the volume, or their earphone plug isn't working anymore. They literally set up a desk in the car wash waiting area that fixed mobile devices. Now there's a lot of places you can go to get your mobile device fixed. There's a lot of places online that show you how to fix your own mobile device. But this one was someone who took advantage of someone having to stand around with nothing else to do and having a type of repair that generally takes about 30 minutes to do. What a perfect match. So that's a really good example of don't limit yourself. Don't think that you have to do what everyone else is doing. Find the thing that makes what you're doing different, and you'll be able to succeed. And the way I always mention it, because what I do in this business has been an evolutionary process as well. We've been in business about 14 or 15 years now. A lot of things that we've tried, we go full steam, and a lot of things we've hit the wall and we've fallen down. It just didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. That didn't work so well. That didn't work anywhere close to what we would thought. It's constant trial and error. In fact, it's mostly error that you will run into with any business. The real difference is keeping going, getting yourself up, learning from what didn't work, and tweak it a little bit more to do it differently the next time and see how that works. And it's just constant banging your head against the wall. Who wouldn't want to do that? Sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think going away from this, I think I'm going to go forward on and definitely try to do my best on this. I do appreciate it. I think I'm going to go down that road.
Good for you. That's a great thing to focus on too. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
That's whenever somebody says I want to work for myself, I of course have a soft spot for that. To be able to do that, because that's one of the things I wanted to do. I worked for someone else my entire career as a system administrator, a network administrator, a systems engineer working in networking, a systems engineer working in security fields. I wanted to work for myself. So it was important for me to find a way to do that. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I tried a lot of different things, and ultimately you do figure it out. Before we go back to the calls, thank you for holding, callers. Somebody in the chat room asking, they see I put up 3 more videos for the 221002 very recently. There's 46 of them there. How many more do I plan on doing? Actually, I put 10 videos up in the last 3 days. So there have been a lot of videos posted in the last 3 days. I've actually finished shooting the videos. So all I have are video on disk, on storage, ready to be edited. And there are approximately 12 to 13 more to go. So we're very close to the end. There's probably more. I hope to have more posted this week. We'll see how it goes. Certainly, we'll have this done well before the end of the month. So, or at least, I won't say well before. We will have this done by the end of the month. I think as if we look at it right now, we're so close to the end. It's going to happen pretty quickly. Back to the phone lines. Let's go to the 440 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, I'm George. I'm calling from Michigan.
Hey, George.
And yeah,
What can
I was looking at the exam objectives for the RAM area and all some of the connectors, and I was taking some practice tests, and I noticed there's a lot of questions on these practice tests about how many pins are on a DDR 1, 2, or 3 card.
Right.
And I was wondering, how often do these types of questions show up? There's a lot that you'd have to remember for each type, what speed each one is, how many pins each one has, and that can take up a lot of time. And if there's areas that would be better off that you're studying, I'd rather do that than take the time to learn all these different amounts of pins on each card.
I agree. I could not agree more. In fact, if you look at many sample tests that you will run into, especially online sample exams, they ask questions that are not only a little obscure, they're very trivial in the information they're asking for, like the number of pins that are on a type of memory interface. And they also don't have any complexity to them at all. And in some cases, they answer them wrong, which is even more frustrating. Fortunately, right. And what we've seen on the A+ exam over time is CompTIA isn't asking a lot of trivial questions on their exam these days. They don't tend to ask you how many pins is on a thing. They don't tend to ask you what a particular color, a particular cable running a particular voltage is. Because quite honestly, that's not important. What's important is that you can recognize it. You understand what that particular device is. You can look at a memory a memory module and say, well, this is something you can run into. This is something that you can recognize, and something that oh, that's a memory module. That's really what they're looking for. And in fact, in my videos for the 1001, I was putting some of that information in because the exam objectives asked you to recognize the properties of a memory adapter or a memory card, that memory module, a DDR3, a DDR4. But in their latest exam objectives, they talk about installing RAM. Given a scenario, install this memory. They've no longer asked about understanding the properties of the memory module. And I took that as enough of a clue, along with what I've heard with CompTIA's testing, that I didn't feel that information was as important for anyone to know for the exam. So you'll see in my 1001 videos, I don't put pin counts on there at all because they're not important.
Yeah.
That's why they're not there. The other exam, if you run into exam questions or sample questions on the internet that ask that, then they're effectively out of scope for the exam objectives. Will CompTIA ever ask that again? They certainly could, but I think they've kind of moved off into a more broader perspective of what you need to know, rather than asking you colors, numbers, or trivia.
Do you mind if I ask a second question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so on their website, they do have performance-based questions. CompTIA has performance sample-based questions. And when they ask it, they want you to do something very specific. Like there was one where they wanted you to go into the access control list and find out which one was causing a certain computer to be unable to communicate to the internet. And with the command prompts that they give you, they want you to do something very specific, and there's a lot of commands that they don't include. Like they want you to use pane, the first thing that I thought was to use a traceroute to see where the IP was like getting stuck at, where it couldn't get past. How do you know what to do with these command line prompts? And is there any way you can practice them? Because they want you to do something very, very specific. And if you're not doing it in the way that they want to, you're not going to have much success.
I've seen some of these sample questions that CompTIA puts on their website, and I'm as stymied as anyone else as to some of the things they're asking, because the performance-based questions you're going to get on the exam are much more straightforward. They're much more to the point. They're much more specific in what they're asking you to do. The ones that they have on their website seem a little vague in sections. I'm not sure who wrote the ones on the website, but it doesn't seem to be the same people that wrote the ones that are on the exam. As odd as that seems, I don't know if that's the case, but it sure seems that way. It's almost like two different people were writing those two different parts of this. So I would not necessarily worry about vagueness, because when you get on the actual exam, there will be very specific questions. Those questions have a very specific answer. It should be very obvious to you which is the right way to go with solving these particular problems that they present. And you're not going to be in a situation where, hey, do I use ping here or trace route? You're not going to be in a situation where you're going to be questioning what you're doing between those. I think it's more of somebody who may have posted a vague question on their site for whatever reason. I don't know why they do that. They continue to do this. It's not something new, by the way. This was with the 900 series as well, that the sample questions they give you are less of a sample and more of a question. And I don't know why they do that, but there it is. And as people are mentioning, it's not a full-featured CLI. It's a simulation. We recognize that, but it's very odd in the way that they're asking some of those questions in their sample that don't seem to translate back to an actual exam experience, which I think probably would be a better thing to put on their website. But there it is anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for calling, George. Appreciate it. It's frustrating, I realize. And maybe they're just trying to give you some content that you could work through with these sample questions without giving anything away. But that certainly runs into an issue when you're trying to solve these problems. The 561 area code, thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, good afternoon, Professor. My name is Josephine, and I'm calling from Florida. I'm in the West Palm Beach area, and I actually went to school for this thing. I'm trying to avoid like not to spend extra cash that I don't have. I already
Me
got your
too.
notes already. I got your notes. I watched your videos, but I feel like I graduated from the program like computer information technology in 2016, and the school that I had went to learn this program, basically it was like a 9-month course for computer network technician, and then I barely had the time to really study for my exam, so I found myself always having to go back and retake the exams and stuff. So my question is, what kind of like books like do you recommend? You know, because all my stuff is really outdated. What kind of books like do you recommend that way I can get like back into the studying mode? Because I have your training notes. I watch the videos, but I still find myself like even when I studied with you guys today, there's some terms I'm like, what is I thought this was this, and it's like my mind is just like all over the place right now. So I don't know. What kind of books do you recommend? And then not only that too, being the fact that I'm a woman, I'm trying to be a woman in tech, and I'm in the classroom. I was in the classroom fully man dominated, which I'm not afraid of, but it's kind of hard, I feel like I need like a mentor or something, someone that's in the field. So
well, first let's start with the best way to study for this exam and some of the resources you can get your hands on. I find the best resource everybody should be using is the exam objectives. The exam objectives have everything on them that you need to know for the exam. They list out every single topic from every single part of the exam. And if there's a technology or a term or a sequence of words that you're just not familiar with, it's going to be in these exam objectives. I often tell people, if you can repeat to someone else what that exam objective means, if you can describe it to someone else, then you probably have a pretty good grasp of what that objective is, and you can go to the next one. It makes a great checklist. You're sure no matter what book you're using that you'll be able to cover every single topic, because you'll be able to go through CompTIA's list of what they say you should be doing and be able to look through those. That is my number one. Always, first place you should go is those exam objectives. It's the last thing you should be referencing before you walk into the exam. The other thing is that I don't necessarily recommend one particular book, but I do recommend that you go out to Amazon and read through a number of different books. If you're studying for the 1000 series exam, there are already a few 1000 series books that are available on Amazon. And fortunately, Amazon lets you read through part of the book. I find that different books, especially certification books, different books talk to me differently. The author has a different voice. They use different ways of communicating. And I find if I'm able to read through the first chapter of one book, read through the first chapter of another, and read through the first chapter of the third, I get a pretty good idea of which one works better for me. And sometimes the one that works better for me is not the one that works better for everyone else. Most of the books cover all of the exam objectives, so you don't have to worry so much about quality. They've got the right quantity. You just have to find the one that puts it in the right perspective for you. So it doesn't matter which one of those you use. Just make sure that the book matches the exam version that you're going to take. If you're going to take the 1000 series exams, make sure you get books that are for the 1000 series tests. You don't want to mix and match with those pieces. And as far as a woman in IT, there are statistically, there are more men working in IT than women, but those numbers are changing dramatically as the years are going on. I think women are starting to understand that technology itself is not something limited to men, even though it seems to be more of those folks are in that industry. And even my daughter is getting an IT, is majoring in IT. She'll get an IT degree. She'll be working in IT. But so at least one of my sons is interested in IT as well. So I'm seeing a nice mix of those. And if you go to an industry trade show, if you go to a local user group in your area, you'll be surprised at how many more women you will find working in IT than you had even 5 or 10 years ago. So I'm seeing the numbers change there as well. The advantage is the computer doesn't care what you are. You could be an alien from space who has come to Earth. You can work on computers just fine. So it doesn't matter what gender you happen to be when you walk into the room. As long as you're able to accomplish and solve the problems in front of you and solve the problem for the organization and use technology to do it, you're going to be valuable in that particular role.
Okay, because I'm around a whole bunch of nurses, and and it's like everybody asking me, what did you study?
Right.
Well, I studied IT. Wow, you know.
This is one of those challenges, though, that I think people should study the things they want to study. And if you happen to want to go into nursing, go into nursing. If you happen to want to go into IT, go into IT. There's nothing at the door that says, well, wait a second, we need to check your gender here to see whether you're going to be doing this technical STEM type thing. Nobody's asking that. The doors are open for everybody to do anything they would like. And I think if you're interested in technology, IT is a great place to be. There are tons of jobs available. They pay extremely well. If you become knowledgeable in that, you move up very quickly in that industry because it's so hard to find good people. And you can decide yourself where you want to go in that particular industry. If you want to go into management, if you want to go into project management, if you want to go into engineering, doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what your gender is either. I've worked with men and women throughout my career in all of those different fields, and it didn't matter. They were just smart people that were doing smart things in those particular areas of technology.
Okay. And my other question is, I stay in the West Palm Beach area, and I've been looking. I'm on Indeed. I go to different sites, and I'm trying to look for work in the field, but it seems like everybody's asking for A+, and that gets me frustrated and discouraged. You know, and I'm looking, but still nothing. Everybody requires for you to have the certification, which is why I'm trying to go after it.
I think that's a great place to go. In fact, you're doing the thing I think most people should be doing, is finding out what employers are looking for and then going down that road to get that certification. Very often people are asking me, what certification should I take next? Should I take A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus? And I said, I don't know. What do people want you to have? That's the real question. If everybody's looking for A+ in your area and you're seeing that as a primary or one of the single threads that always keeps coming up with these positions, then you know you're going the right direction. You know you're getting the right certification as the first step. Do you need more than A+? Of course you do. With any job, you need more than just one thing. But if everybody's asking for that, it certainly is a good idea to at least have that listed on your resume and be able to talk about your experiences with that cert. That's absolutely the right direction you should be going.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Josephine. Best of luck.
God bless you. All right, thank you.
That's so important, though, is to know where you're going next. And I've mentioned before, you don't have to know where you're going 5 years from now. They always ask that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself next? That's all you really need to answer. That's probably the most important one you need to answer. And then if you want to stretch it to 5 years later, you can do that. But most of us just want to know what's next. Where should I set my goals so that I can get to the next step? And even if you don't know where you go from there, that's okay. You'll figure it out once you get to the next step. Very often, we don't have control over these things anyway. Things just happen in our world, and we end up having to move, or an opportunity comes up in another company, and you have somebody you know who works somewhere else gives you a call out of the blue and says, hey, we just had a job opening, and this sounded perfect for you. What do you think? Which has happened to me. And literally, those things can change your life. You have to be ready when those calls come. Let's go to 876. Hello, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Messer, what's up?
Hello.
I'm Courtney from Jamaica.
Oh, welcome. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Hey, I just want to say, congratulations on the program. It's been good. The groups have been good.
Thank you.
We get to Lime and network and all that. I'm currently preparing for A+ exam. I'm already Network Plus certified, Security Plus certified.
Great.
But I'm not sure why I'm finding the Network Plus so challenging. The A+ so challenging right now, actually.
It's a tough exam. I started my first certification with CompTIA was the Security Plus. Then I got the Network Plus, and then I finally went back to the A+. And I found the same thing, that I thought I knew computers and technology until I took the A+ and realized I didn't know anything.
So it's been challenging, you know. So, you know, I'm just trying to prepare for this new exam, though. You know, what are your thoughts? What are your tips?
So were you previously studying for the 900 series, or did you jump into the 1000 series to start with?
No, I started with the 1000 series.
Well, already you're doing great then, because you don't have to backtrack. There's a lot of things that you didn't have to learn that now you don't have to know about. You're starting in the right place, especially given that you've got 3 years now before that particular exam series is retired. And I kind of like the topics that are on the latest A+. It's just a relatively minor update. 20% is a minor update in the big scheme of things. Yeah. It's obviously a big difference if you're somebody who's taking the exam. But in the world of hardware and technology, things don't change that quickly in the world. So you're already studying the right set of things. My standard topics and suggestions for studying, there are 4 different things. You need a good book, and make sure that your book is for the 1000 series exams. These have only recently been released. So don't use a 900 series book. Make sure they are 1000 series book, and they say so on the front cover. Get some good videos. You can use my videos or use any other videos. Some people like my videos. Some people don't like my videos. I don't care which ones you use, but I find that video teaches you in a way that a book doesn't, and books teach you in a way that a video doesn't. So I think combining those two things together are very powerful. So I don't care what book you get. I don't care what videos you watch, but make sure you do 2 of those. The third one is get plenty of good Q&A. Sure. And good Q&A is kind of hard to find right now. There are some 1000 series Q&A guides that are out. Those are just now starting to be released. You'll see more in the upcoming months, I'm sure. I will be working on my own 1000 specific Q&A. So these will be coming out. It's sometimes hard to find those, but get as much Q&A as you can. And the last one is hands-on. You'll notice the performance-based questions on the exam might be asking you to type things into the command prompt. They may be asking you the process for installing different things inside of your computer. You need some way to get some hands-on touching of these things. There's something about doing this with your fingers, typing things in at the keyboard that give you some type of visceral feedback. There's some muscle memory, some synapse that fires in the brain that locks things in. And I think reading about it and watching someone do it is important, but actually typing it in yourself may lock it in so that you can refer to those things later if it comes up on the exam. It's another one of those ideas about combining these different ways of study that might make it best for you. So those are the 4 that I always mention to people. Good book, good videos, make sure you do plenty of Q&A and get plenty of hands-on. And of course, you should be using your exam objectives as the checklist as you go through all 4 of those things.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck. That's fantastic. Whenever you're studying for any of these exams, and CompTIA's exam objectives are a leg up that nobody gives you, make sure you take advantage of that. People come into my chat room all the time, and they say, I took my exam, and there were things on my exam that were listed I wasn't expecting. And I asked for an example, and they gave me the topics that were on their exam. And I said, well, the topics, those are in the exam objectives. And they go, what are the exam objectives? And they missed it. A huge opportunity. Missed it. Don't let that miss you. That's something you should not fall under. That happens to you. Let's go to 502. If I punch the right button there, 502 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Ben, and I'm calling from Louisville, Kentucky. How are you doing?
Welcome, Ben. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, I just finished my entry-level classes at JCTC locally here, and I was really afraid that I was not gonna pass the math, but I passed with a 7.5 instead of 7.4. But my point is, back in high school, I took the A+ course back then, and I was such a computer newbie back then that I didn't know what the heck I was walking into, and I didn't really pay attention back then, so I flunked the test with a 41% by some sheer accident, and nonetheless, so I'm planning to take it again at my college, and I was wondering if you had any advice for kind of a guy who's been playing around with Linux, Mac, and Windows for years and loves building computers and things like that, because I have had some hands-on experience with Linux. Hell, I've built Linux from scratch a couple times in Gentoo and various other advanced as heck distros that most, people who don't play with Linux wouldn't know what the heck he's talking about. And I've also done, Mac on PC, troubleshooted Macs a couple times, and various Windows versions and things like that. I have seen some of your videos and read some of the A+ book and that sort of thing. And I've read the 901, started the 901 book recently, but I haven't gotten too depth into it. And I was thinking about getting the 10,000 series book because, I really am liking the A+ and wanting to further experience it with my school. But I was wondering if you had any preliminary tips that I could do before I take the course in the fall and that sort of thing.
Well, you're already a little ahead of the game, and your experiences sound very similar to mine before taking the A+ certification. I'd already worked as a field technician. I had worked on at the time compact servers. So these were servers running network operating systems running at the time Novell. So I'm dating myself a bit, but the technology hasn't changed that much, just the names have. So I've already was familiar with the hardware. I was doing memory installations and upgrades. I was doing storage drive installations and upgrades. I was familiar with the mechanics of doing those things. But what I wasn't familiar with, as it turned out, was what was underneath the surface. How was the memory and the CPU talking to each other? How did all of these things connect together? What were those voltages, and how does the power work?
So you had to learn the backbone.
I did. I kind of had to go back and get the fundamentals down to get all of those pieces in place. And that's what I really enjoyed about the A+. Yeah. And it is sort of one of those things where you have to now go back to the book. You have to go back to the videos. You kind of have to wait for somebody to kind of break these things down for you. And you'll get suddenly a light will turn on and go, oh, that's why whenever I was installing this particular adapter card, I ran into the issue that we had with power and running the extra wire. Suddenly things started to make more sense to me. And I think they'll make more sense to you as well.
So I'm kind of in the same boat where, I know what I'm doing. I just have to get the backbone of what everything's doing.
Yeah. Why is that working that way when I install it? When you start up Linux and all these things go by and all these hexadecimal addresses show up, what is that talking about? Why are they even showing that to me? I didn't care because Linux worked. But now I'm understanding, okay, that's the memory address of the PCI card that has the video adapter that's going to be loading for the kernel to have the video driver. So all of it starts to make more sense once you go through that process.
Because you could install the thing all day long and it won't make sense to you unless you actually learn the backbone.
It is. If you want a heads up before you get into your class, grab the exam objectives, start going through some of the specifics on the exam objectives. You can certainly get a book or read through some of the, watch some of the videos that are online and get an overview of some of those things. I would imagine if you're taking a class, you'll be able to go into much more detail in the class. But I think the one thing that will really help you, if you can start reading ahead, you're going to have a bunch of questions. And when you get into the room, you'll be able to ask those questions of an instructor. You'll be able to discuss those topics with the other people in the room, which in my mind is the huge advantage of going into a formal classroom setting.
Yeah, and the classroom place is only like 30 minutes away from my house downtown. So, and my dad, he's actually on the board of the school, and he used to work for IBM, for years, and he even ran his own software development company called Adware long ago. And so, yeah, I think you answered my question that I need to start, prepping ahead before I go into the class. So, yeah, it was great to talk to you, and I'll use your videos in that book. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Best of luck. One of the things that I highly recommend, if you're somebody who's been in these classroom settings, and I come from an environment of systems engineering for manufacturers. And for those of you not familiar, if you're working for like the last position I had was with Palo Alto Networks. So I was a systems engineer with Palo Alto Networks. I would walk into a customer. I would explain to them the value of this particular product. I would plug it into their network for an evaluation. I would make sure that the next generation firewall was working the way it worked, that it was providing the features they were looking for, and that all of those things would work. One of the things that you have to do before any of that happens, though, is you have to get trained. So all of these systems engineers that you run into in all of these companies have gone to corporate training classes. They usually happen 2 to 4 times a year. You're going to these classes. You're sitting in a classroom for a week. You're going through 4 to 5 separate training sessions a day in some cases, and you're learning from the developers of the product. You're learning from the product managers. You're learning more about it. But one of the things it taught me, and one of the things that I would highly recommend that all of you get accustomed to doing, is it taught me to ask questions. Doesn't sound like an earth-shattering thing when you say it this way, but if you are sitting in a classroom, and I know you've done this, if you've been in any classroom setting and the teacher goes through something in the front and they talk about a topic and they say, any questions? Room is silent. Okay, let's go to the next topic. And then you continue on. And then you all come out of the room going, did you understand a thing about what they said at the beginning with the thing they were talking about? Or no, I didn't get that at all. No, I missed that completely. I didn't understand what they were saying. Well, why didn't someone ask a question? That was the part that suddenly I realized we were missing an opportunity. We had all of these people that are in the room. They were the developer of the product, and I'm responsible for now telling our customers how important this product is. I'm going to be asking some questions. And the important thing was that I found was that they would go through that and they'd say, any questions? And I'd say, yes, have no idea what you're talking about. Missed the entire thing. I was with you up to this point, and then I lost it. And other people in the room go, yeah, I didn't get that either. And he backtracks and goes, oh, I forgot to tell you about this thing. And then they put it together, or they re-explain what they were doing. If you were the one asking the question, then not only are you improving your knowledge of what you were doing, you're actually helping other people in the room as well. You should never, never, never be afraid to ask a question. You should never, never, never be afraid to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. People think they are going to seem like they're stupid, like they're dumb. Well, we all are dumb and stupid about these things until we learn it. And if you're in a classroom, it's already given that you don't know this. So I'm not sure what you're worried about. You should absolutely raise your hand and say, not with you, buddy. Have no idea what you're saying. Can we backtrack on that, or can we follow up after this is over? They will be more than happy to help you. You should be the one asking questions. Sit in the front of the room and ask the question. Now, obviously, don't stop the instructor every 2 seconds with questions, but you should be in finding out what they're saying, writing down the things you have questions about, and then you can backtrack over them. Very often, the better training came from the questions we asked than from the original presentation that was given. So that's where you should focus your efforts if you get into that type of environment. Let's go to 559. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 559. Are you there? Are you on mute, 559?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. My name is Luis. I'm calling from Long Beach.
Hi, Luis. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I just had a question about the exam objectives, 1001, section 3-5.
Hit me.
Okay. I'm not very comfortable using drive encryption on my laptop. What are the pros and cons of using drive encryption, and what happens if the TPM fails?
Well, one of the advantages you have, and you're right on the money with, you got a laptop, you've got a need to keep things safe, and you've got maybe a need to do full disk encryption if it's on the laptop. And very commonly we use things like BitLocker to be able to do that. And of course, I recommend always that you have some type of full disk encryption and you have some way to keep everything safe. If everything happens to go sideways, you need some way to be able to recover this information. Now, every full disk encryption program has some type of way to create a recovery key and to keep this safe. And the same thing is there with BitLocker, because the only thing that TPM is doing for you is, well, I say the only thing, but it's creating a secure place to keep these keys, and it's creating a secure way for you to access the encryption keys that you have on your system. Generally, that piece of hardware is not one that fails. There's no moving parts. It's a solid state component. There's not something that is very commonly failing with the TPM, but Strange things happen. Well, I'm here in the South, lightning strikes, your TPM flakes out, your computer's still running, and now you have no way to access your data. So Microsoft does have a way with BitLocker to create a recovery key from the BitLocker front end so that you can save that key off to maybe a USB drive or to something else and store it external to your laptop so that if you somehow need to have access to that data, you can. The other thing you should also, of course, consider having, and you probably should on your system, is a backup of your data. You know, once you've logged in with BitLocker and you're in your laptop computer, now your data needs to be backed up. Just because you have BitLocker doesn't mean it's protected. So ideally, there's a separate backup process that is also encrypted, by the way, but it's a separate type of encryption that has associated with the backup. So if you needed to restore that data, you have a separate restoration key that you would use for that data. So there's two places you get to go, and you don't have to worry that you're going to lose any of this data because you have a backup of your encryption key and you have a backup of the raw data somewhere else that's always kept off-site so that you have access. If maybe, let's say that BitLocker goes south, you suddenly don't have access to the TPM and the recovery key you thought you had is not working the way you were expecting, and suddenly you can't access any of the data on the drive, you've still got your backup. So it's never one thing. It's always multiple things, Luis.
Yes, Professor. I was wondering, like, maybe if I drop my laptop or something, but I do work kind of like in a public environment, and I'm not sure if I should put like old-timey wax seals on the bottom of my laptop.
This, you know, having physical access
to like another room and comes back with it.
Right. Somebody having physical access to your computer is always a concern. You should never leave your systems unattended. They should always be locked up somewhere. Having someone have physical access to your computer could also mean they would have physical access to your drive. BitLocker helps some with that because BitLocker is using the TPM of your machine. Someone just can't take your drive, put it in a separate device, and be able to access that data. But you also have concerns that somebody having access to your computer could put other things on your computer. They could add other physical hardware keyloggers or other ways to access your computer from there. So, of course, there should always be a way to protect that system. If you're in a hotel, for instance, it should be stored and locked away. You're never 100% sure of anything, but at least you know you're following the right steps to make sure that you can feel comfortable with the safety and the trust that you have of the data that's on that system.
I just want to thank you, Professor Messer. You're a great resource.
I appreciate it, Luis. Thanks for calling. I appreciate your questions. That's a very valuable thing to consider as well, because a lot of people, I think, are doing BitLocker, and they may not consider what happens if the TPM goes away. I think it's the first time anybody's even asked me, what happens if your TPM fails, which is possible. That's a perfectly valid concern. You should have a backup of your key. What if that fails? You should have a backup of your data. Maybe you're storing some of the data on the cloud. What if the cloud if somebody has access to that and erases your data? You should have offline backups. If you don't have backups, you're in trouble. I always back up everything that's in the studio. So there's backups of what's in front of me, all of the videos that I create. The instant I create my videos, there's a backup made of them. Immediately when we're done with the session, I set the backup process to copy those files off. So it's tens of gigabytes of video in a single night that I'm pushing off to a separate set of drives because I don't want anything to happen to that data. You should consider and make sure you have that there as well. Make sure that's the case. So that's where you should go with anything else is always have a backup. It doesn't matter what happens. You could be hit with maybe your BitLocker is working fine, and suddenly you go to the wrong website or you click on the wrong link in your email, and now suddenly everything on your drive's encrypted with some type of cryptography, cryptovirus, crypto malware. Well, now your BitLocker is not going to help you at all. You have to have a backup. So the backups are always the important thing to have. Let's go to 214. Hello, 214. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 214 area code. Are you there, caller?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead with your question.
I'm Megatron from Dallas. I want to ask, what happens when the Windows firewall goes down?
Is this a situation that you've run into? If there's a Windows firewall that you've been using, has it been disabled? Is there a particular scenario you're thinking about?
Like, especially being like disabled, like what exactly happens?
And that's probably, if you ever notice, your Windows firewall should just always be running. There's probably never a good reason for that Windows firewall to not be active and running on your computer. And sometimes when you're trying to troubleshoot inbound connections to a computer, maybe you have a service that's running, sometimes you would disable the firewall, see if you can get the service running. And then if you can, then you know the problems with your firewall and you can create a specific exception for that inbound traffic. However, you may notice that if you're using your computer and suddenly the Windows firewall disables itself or your antivirus disables itself, that's more indicative of malware that's already on your computer that's now going into those settings and turning things off, because malware doesn't want to have to deal with your firewall. Malware wants to have immediate access to your computer from the outside, and so it starts turning things off. And it certainly doesn't want you running antivirus and being able to remove it, and it doesn't want you to visit any anti-malware sites where you could download signatures or programs to remove it. So if you happen to see Windows Firewall failing, it could be malware. It could also be a problem with the Windows Firewall service that's running on your computer. So there could be a couple of places that you would go to help troubleshoot. One of the best places you could go to really find out what's happening is the event viewer and find out why was the firewall turned off. There should be an entry in Event Viewer that gives you more information on what's going on. And he's gone, and he's hung up. I'm waiting for no response whatsoever because he's not there. But I appreciate him calling. That's going to be something that you run into whenever you're troubleshooting and something weird is happening in Windows. Something odd is happening, always go to the log. In fact, it's the same whether you're in Windows, whether you're in Mac OS, or whether you're in Linux, you go to the logs, which is why in the A+ on the 1002 exam, there are specific areas where on Mac OS, they want you to know where the logs are. In Linux, they want you to know where the logs are, and in Windows, it's important to know about Event Viewer, so you can go to those logs as well. All of those incredibly important. You absolutely want to step through each one of those and know where to find that data and start breaking it out. I've had things happen on my desktop as I've been working with it. There have been things that have happening. I go straight to the logs because it may be a little bit difficult to decipher because it's a completely different language when you start breaking out the log files, but it does show you more information about what you can be breaking down and be able to see those things. So hopefully that will help you as well. Well, with that, we have come to the end of another hour. Can you believe we went through an hour of Q&A? We went through an hour of your phone calls. Thank you for both of those. We would not be able to do these study groups without your help and your participation. We love having you here. We love writing these questions for you. We will continue to do one of these every month. They're just so much fun. Thank you for being here for the 1001. Come back on Thursday. You know, it's Tuesday as we are recording this. 2 days from now, we are doing the 1002 A+ study group. I have a whole nother set of questions that is just for the 1002 exam, and we will go through all of those in the same way, and we'll open up the phone lines after that one as well and go through some of those so that you can ask any question you would like about anything. Thanks for being here this time. We will see you next time on the A+ study group.